Welcome to Indie Film Forum. I'm your host, Kalpana Biswas. My guest today is Kirsi Jansa, a filmmaker and journalist who has just premiered her latest documentary series, Sustainability Pioneers, in Pittsburgh. Her previous series, Gas Rush Stories related to Marcellus Shale, received critical recognition in Southwest Pennsylvania and in national media. Kirsi was born in Finland and was a broadcast journalist with the Finnish Broadcasting Company before coming to Pittsburgh. I'm happy to welcome Kirsi to Indie Film Forum. Kirsi, you grew up in Finland. What was in that environment that got you interested in sustainability and environment and public health?
I grew up in the eastern part of Finland, and I think everywhere in Finland, nature is just somehow much more closer to people than in the US. My parents took me fishing and we went picking mushrooms, and I go running in the woods.
And that's a wonderful, pristine kind of setting to grow up in. And then you joined a Finnish Broadcasting Company. How did that help your development as a filmmaker?
I started working for the Finnish Broadcasting Company in '93 when I started working for a program called Ecoist. And it was like a pioneering program about sustainability for consumers, how consumers could make sustainable decisions. So that was kind of my introduction to environmental issues. And when I was studying in the University of Tampere, my minor was public health. So I have been working for a number of years, from 93 to 99, 2000. I worked with the public health and environmental issues.
You subsequently came to Pittsburgh and you started on your series, The Gas Rush Stories.
Well, we came to Pittsburgh in 2008, and because I love my profession, I wanted to do what I love to do and continue on my field. But not being a native speaker, then it took me a while to figure out how am I going to be able to do this. So I stepped from front of the camera, being the journalist or the anchor, so I stepped behind the camera and started doing my own documentaries. I had some other ideas. I wanted to do stories for nonprofits or families, kind of like video diaries. But then I went and I watched Gasland, and I started learning about what's happening related to shale gas drilling in the area. I wanted to do my own version of it, and I wanted to do it from a journalistic perspective. Well, very first I did the story for the Finnish Broadcasting Company on Marcellus Shale, and I was sent to do a balanced story from different perspectives. While I was working on that, then I got the idea of doing this series of short documentaries that would approach the issue from different perspectives. There's the story of a blind wise king who wants to know what an elephant looks like, and that was my inspiration behind it, that if we as a nation, if we want to make informed decisions, this is how we need to approach any issue and look at it from different perspectives. And with Gas Rush Stories, that was my intention, that I would go around Marcellus Shale and look at how different people experience it.
And now you're on Sustainability Pioneers.
There were challenges doing the Gas Rush Stories because there were people who did not want to talk to me, and this was the industry, and I was not able to talk to DEP either. So that was somehow challenging, and so that's why it's not as balanced of a picture as I wanted it to be. But what came apparent when I was working on this series was that how little there is talk about alternatives to shale gas. Somehow the main media was not covering that, and this question that are there alternatives? What's happening to renewables? There's a lot of talk about shale gas being a bridge to a renewable energy. But there's just the question, but there's no answers, and really seeing that if that's happening. And also being European and seeing that the discussion about renewable energy and climate change is just totally different in Europe. And somehow I saw the need that there's a need for, instead of just talking about the problems, we need to look in the solutions also. So sustainability pioneers came out of a discussion with the German Umweltbundesamt, which is the German EPA environmental agency, and they're head of their sustainability strategies. I was filming 2 years ago in Germany for Gas Stories, and I got to interview this director, and I asked him that what needs to happen in the US before US is where Germany is today, producing 25% of their energy with renewables. The US is at 8%. Pennsylvania is less than 4%. So, and he said that, number one, you have to educate the people. Next morning I woke up, I'm like, okay, there's my next project. So Sustainability Pioneers is about how we could transition to renewable energy future. And also look at the people who are already doing that.
You talk about the fact that Europe is a little bit different from the US in that. How is that different? How is the US different?
Well, it starts like, for example, Germany. They started talking to the people, educating the people 30 years ago about the energy transition and need to that. For example, then there's just somehow renewable energy and all that, it's much more present there and in media also. I was surprised to see when I started working on Gas Stories, there was a roundtable discussion with the journalists about Marcellus Shale, with journalists who are covering Marcellus Shale. During that 1 hour discussion, there was no talk about alternatives. It's just somehow like that perspective seems to be missing here.
Well, let's look at sustainability pioneers.
So the climate is changing faster than our efforts to address it.
There is an urgency to acting unlike anything we've seen before. If we're going to avoid committing to those truly damaging, potentially irreversible changes.
The alarm bells keep ringing. Our citizens keep marching. We cannot pretend we do not hear them. We have to answer the call.
Fossil fuels have got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Fossil fuels have got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Fossil fuels have got to go. Hey, hey.
The sun rises over Pittsburgh and still the city stays hazy. Pennsylvania is the third largest producer of greenhouse gases in the US. The energy sector is among the largest emitters of greenhouse gases and other air pollutants.
By 2050, we've got to cut our carbon dioxide emissions by 80%. Now that means cutting 80% of what you're 85% dependent on. This is a major challenge.
Pennsylvania is one of the 17 states with a policy that allows customers to choose renewable energy instead of fossil fuels or nuclear energy. Still, the transition to cleaner renewable energy is beginning here slowly.
So I see a very small indication of some action at the riverbank in terms of wind power manufacturing, wind installation, solar photovoltaic cell manufacturing, photovoltaic cell R&D, but it's not much more than I would say clearing the bank for construction. I would say we're that far.
I am off to visit those people who are starting to build a bridge to a sustainable energy future.
Welcome to Windstacks. Yeah, this was the first, actually second working scale prototype I built about 4 years ago. So WindStax is a vertical axis wind turbine, and what that means is that it has a rotor that spins on a vertical axis as opposed to a horizontal axis like a windmill. That's traditionally what people see. All windmills will work great at 12.5 meters per second, which is the rating, the industry standard rating, which is great. But at that speed, how often does somewhere like Pittsburgh get that speed? Well, not very often. The average is 9 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, sometimes less. So our philosophy is, let's use the wind energy at the wind speeds that are prevalent in a specific area rather than ones that happen sporadically. Different philosophy. It's been called a functional piece of art, and it's a moniker that we're really proud of here at WindStax. So the advantages of a vertical axis turbine are that they take much less of a footprint for installation. Plus, they capture wind from all directions. This one is going on the rooftop of the Pittsburgh Public Market, right down in the Strip District of Pittsburgh on 24th and Penn. It'll be the first urban wind turbine of its type anywhere in the United States. So it's a pretty exciting project. Many of our customers not only have wind, but they have geothermal systems, they have solar systems. We design all our systems to be scalable.
What is special about this place?
It's the country, out away from everything, very windy, very peaceful, and very pretty. It would be nice if it paid for everything, took me completely off the grid, but there are days when I just don't have wind up here and I still use things in the house and the batteries get depleted. Hopefully those days will be few and far between. So if it catches 3/4 of what my power is for the year, I'd be happy with that. Sometimes you just take a flying leap and hope for the best. I don't think I'll lose my shirt, but again, it'll remain to be seen whether or not it becomes viable or not. I think it's worth it. If I'm wrong, it's my loss. None of the prices of energy is going to go down over time. I really don't believe that. Okay, the main unit's right here. Most of it is ductwork. You have a condenser and a blower motor.
So is that your only source of heat?
Yes. Yeah, it is. It will run longer. It doesn't get to be a hot heat like a gas furnace. What comes out of the ductwork inside isn't what you get in a normal house, so it runs a little bit longer. It actually works better as an air conditioner because you're pulling cooler temperature out and then condensing that, so it actually cools more quickly, more efficiently than it does heat. I'm not into the argument of coal and gas-fired power plants. That's an argument that's for other people, not me. So if I can do a small part to just make things use what's there.
Welcome to Sunscape. The potential I see here in southwestern Pennsylvania is huge because there are nothing but open rooftops everywhere we look.
We believe that in the future, people will be asking each other, what type of solar panels do you have? Really the way that people talk about cell phones today. What type of cell phone do you have?
This room here is what we call our greenhouse, and this is our classroom where we teach everybody about solar energy, about different types of technologies, even financial models. So we'll go over lots of different things like types of solar panels, solar shingles. So this would go on your roof instead of shingles. This one creates AC current directly from the back. This solar panel is actually glass on glass, and it produces power on both sides of the cell. This is a set of thin film chemicals that are put underneath glass to generate energy. And this is one of our flexible solar panels. If your home is energy efficient and you're not using all that much energy for all your things and your utility bill is under $100 a month, you could usually get enough solar on your roof to power your entire home. Here are our meters and monitoring systems, everything that's keeping track of all the different energy that's being produced on our roof. We're producing over 60% of our own power during the summer, spring, and fall months here in Pittsburgh. We're asking them to pay for their energy up front. You're making a purchase, no different than buying a home versus renting a home. Which does it make more sense to do? Buying your energy up front ahead of time versus buying it month to month.
We speak about roadblocks to a renewable energy future. There are several, and they are not technological, really not. They're essentially social and institutional.
We need a lot more education, and we need financial assistance, from the government to help us get there. If you want less of something, you tax it. If you want more of something, you subsidize it. We need to subsidize the consumer so that that helps them make the purchase. And that's where the government has to come in. The rest of it, we'll take it from there. We know what to do.
Selling the problem can lead to paralysis. Selling the solution leads to inspiration, to excitement, to hope. What we need to say is what can be done at each level, in a small company, in a home, in a municipal government, in a federal facility, in a university, in any institution. Take a good hard look at what can be done and take small steps, then larger steps.
I would sure like my daughters 50 years from now to look back and say my dad helped pioneer this alternative energy market, when we all look back and say how ridiculous it was, how much coal and gas that we burned for power. That's a mission. That's a vision. That's a vision to be proud of.
Kirsi, that was really, really interestingly done. It was such a wonderful concept and so important for the US and for Pittsburgh. What are you going to do with the series?
Well, I get funding from the Heinz Endowments and the Fisher Fund of the Pittsburgh Foundation to produce 5 documentaries. Each one of them is going to be about 10 minutes this first year. So I have 2 first ones ready. The first one talks more about also the health impacts, how the energy production, the way we produce and use energy today, how it's impacting our air quality and how it's impacting climate change. The second one, we get into the sustainability pioneers, and 3 next ones are under production, and each one of them is going to be somehow southwestern Pennsylvania based. And we're looking for solutions and how people have overcome the barriers that prevent us from going to renewable energy. Sometimes I traveled to Germany and UK last summer, so I have some examples from abroad also. And right now I'm currently looking for funding so that I will be able to continue the series.
That is such an important piece of work that you're doing. And I also like the fact that it's so tight and you have this very minimalistic style. Andrew Revkin of the New York Times, he wrote an opinion piece last November about you, and it was called...
It was a blog.
It was a blog. It was called A Fresh Look at America's Gaslands, where he said of your style, Jansa has a refreshing style, meaning no style. She listens and records. People state their case and share their feelings, and viewers see lives disrupted and lives uplifted.
Well, Gasworth Stories is a bit different than Sustainability Pioneers. Gasworth Stories came out of my backpack journalism workshop. These are individual stories. And when I go there by myself, I film, I shoot, I edit my stories myself, I do the research, so I can be much more present there by myself instead of going to somebody's home with the whole team. So I can be much more present and I can follow what's happening. That's one the minimalistic and simplistic. And the idea was also that this type of that I works well for stories like Asra stories, because this is for these kind of character-based stories. The other thought about Asra stories was that I wanted to look at the perspective from different perspectives. So I wanted to stay behind. I didn't want to bring any effects or myself in the story. I wanted to listen to your story. How do you see this issue? How do you experience that?
So for instance, you've got a landowner, you've got a person who's in the house, who's trying to get a glass of water, and they get sediment at the bottom. So you have, it's almost a different slice of the issue that one is actually seeing. All of your episodes seem to be, need to be looked at all together to be able to get the whole picture about fracking in Marcellus Shale. I'm assuming that was your intention.
Sure. Ideally, that's the way if you want to understand the whole picture, because quite so often it seems that the U.S. media and the audience is also so divided. There's people who watch Fox News, and there's people who watch Democracy Now, and NPR is somewhere in between, and the other media. But there's not like, and me coming from the Finnish broadcasting company background, where there's more this kind of like, we have to get see the big picture. So that was my attempt, so that you would see from different perspectives. But then there came the challenge, is that, as I mentioned, that it wasn't that easy that to get access, get the industry to talk to me, or there was some company that I give credit for, who's the recycling the wastewater, that they opened their doors, and then the landowner. But it was really hard, the pro-drilling side, because the whole issue of fracking is so polarized. So as soon as you ask any critical questions, you're labeled as a fractivist. And then it's like, we don't talk to you.
Did a few of them kind of stand out to you as really interesting conversations that you had about fracking?
Well, I think each one of them is very special, because it's that personal story, and that's what I love about my work. But I guess one that right now comes to my mind was one of the very first stories that I did on Terry Greenwood. And he had a problem in his farm, and I just went to Terry's funeral this May. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty heartbreaking. Of course, we don't know what caused his brain cancer. But he was very concerned, and he was very sincere, authentic man who was concerned of what's happening to the farming in Pennsylvania.
Let's go ahead and watch one of the episodes that you've done of Gas Rush Stories. I mean, it was so critically acclaimed.
I didn't hesitate, because in 1981, there was a company out of Texas had come up, and my parents had signed a lease, and they didn't hesitate. So I was kind of like my parents, you know. You do what your parents do. I think that's a given, you follow your parents' footsteps, basically, and that's why I signed. Originally, they wanted 2 wells here on our farm, and then they changed it to 6 wells, and then they came back with another option of 8 wells. And this is in 2011, they came in and started to drill and prep the site. They're drilling all 8 wells supposedly on one pad, not very far apart from one another. This is this site, and they want to drill 4 wells this way and 4 wells this way. They just showed up and started putting limestone down, and they brought load after load after load of limestone. Right now they're stopped at 4,500 feet, and they have yet to bring the big rig in, what they call the big rig. So that's where we're at right now, waiting for that big rig to come back. And when the big rig comes back, then they'll go and they'll start out and do the horizontal drill at 6,500 foot depth. Nice, you can see how clean it is. They had another mat on top of here that they drilled off of, and they're cleaning up after themselves. Doing a nice job. They have 9 months from the time they start it to the time they finish it, because they don't want to leave a bunch of sites left open. So that is a nice thing. By law, they have to finish that site.
But if they drill 8 wells, so you have 9 months times 8, they're going to be drilling on your property.
Right, so it'll be years. It'll be 7-8 years before this site will be open for that long a period of time. They put these flags up last week. I think this is where the frack pond's going. Although it's just supposed to have fresh water in it, it won't ever have any frack water in it. Contaminated frack water.
You want to talk about numbers financially? What kind of a deal this is for you?
Well, when it came to leasing land, we didn't get very much because we were the first ones in this area to lease, so we only got $60 an acre. And now they're up to pushing $4,000 an acre.
So your royalty is?
Our royalty is 12.5%. Now they're doing 20% royalties and 18% royalties. So it's my choice. I could have said no. But, by the same token, if these reserves are what they say they are, how much money's enough, I'm the youngest. I have 12 kids, and I've already told my brothers and sisters that I was going to share it with them. So that's important. Now, there's that drilling rig over there, if you want to see it. It's to the right. That rig might come to our farm. The big rig came the last time you were here, just a few days after you were here they came. They're doing horizontal now. They're headed in the northwest direction through our neighbors, and I think a little over 1,000 feet or better.
But they are not fracking yet.
They're not fracking yet. They don't have the water here. They're just in the drilling process, and they're taking the tailings away. They're putting them in the dumpster boxes and hauling them away. So that's about all I know. I don't know much more, and I've been leaving them alone. That's a restricted area. Now they're pulling a rod up now. You can see them pulling one of these sections of pipe up now. And then what they do is they'll thread it into another pipe, and then it'll go down the hole, and then they'll grab another one. It's just a continuous process.
So how has it been for you now, living next to a big rig?
It's not that noisy, and my brother, of course, he lives closer. He lives right here. He says not as noisy as the smaller rig.
The artistic rendering of how that looks like is this. You have, the wells that are going in each direction, and they're collecting the gas out of this location.
So the line starts here on our farm right now, and it goes across our farm, my cousin's farm, our neighbors' farms, and keeps going to a compressor plant. And
how far is that from here?
The compressor plant's probably 2 miles from here, if that. So if the compressor plant's 2 miles from here, then they have a stripping plant that they're going to put somewhere just south of Butler, the city of Butler.
This is where we are, on top of a silo.
So that's what they're in the process of, fracking it, and they think that by the end of the year it's possible the well could be under production. We'll just cross our fingers, hope everything goes well.
What would you say then? There's lots of people who are very critical and very angry also about what's happening with this drilling here. Do you have any greetings, or what would you say?
Well, if it's environmental, I see their concerns. Monetarily wise, if they're I hope it's not jealousy. I think money generated from here is going to help everybody in the community. As far as regulation goes, yeah, I think federal has to regulate, the states have to regulate, and then your townships have to regulate.
When I started the series, I was concerned what was happening with the shale gas drilling, but then I was also thinking that who am I to say that no fracking on my backyard if it's going to be a solution to global warming and climate change. But still, we don't have the answers if it's going to help or if it's not. We don't know what the actual methane emissions of fracking and shale gas drilling is, and that's a huge concern.
Thank you for watching Indie Film Forum. I'm Kalpana Biswas. See you next time. For more information, please visit our websites